US President Donald Trump said Ukraine will sooner or later have to make some painful concessions to end the war. He stressed again that Ukraine doesn't have any strong cards. He made these comments while speaking with journalists in the Oval Office on November 21st. During the media session, a reporter asked Trump about their reaction on his administration's peace plan and quoted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said Ukraine facing the risk of losing its dignity or a key partner.
He'll have to like it, and if he doesn't like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess,
After that, the reporter noted that Kyiv fears losing US support if it rejects that 28-point peace plan. Trump replied that Ukraine doesn't have any strong cards and that a peace deal with Russia should have been struck back in 2024 or even in 2023.
Well, at some point he's going to have to accept something. He hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. This war never would have happened. I inherited this war. And I thought he should have made a deal a year ago, 2 years ago. The ultimate deal would have been if it never started. That would have been the good deal. That could have been done too if you had the right president, but you didn't have the right president.
The Times reports that Trump is convinced Russia holds the advantage and he calls Zelensky's statements about a peace a bluff. The Times reports that Trump has not changed his approach to the war since his February meeting with Zelensky in the Oval Office. He's also convinced that the Ukrainian leader is trying to get more favorable terms from a weak position, while Putin, in Trump's view, holds all the cards. This is why Trump says the pressure should be aimed at Ukraine. Remember, President Trump has given time Ukraine until next Thursday, November 27th, to agree to the US proposed peace plan. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance spoke about the peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. He outlined 3 key conditions that any peace plan between Ukraine and Russia should meet. He shared this on his X account. According to Vance, any peace plan must stop the killing while preserving Ukraine's sovereignty, be acceptable to both Russia and Ukraine, maximize the chances that the war will not start again.
Every criticism of the peace framework the administration is working on either misunderstands the framework or misstates some critical reality on the ground. There is a fantasy that if we just give more money, more weapons, or more sanctions, victory is at hand. Peace won't be made by failed diplomats or politicians living in a fantasy land. It might be made by smart people living in the real world.
Lawmakers from both parties in Congress have already criticized the peace deal proposed by the Trump's administration to end the Russian war. The main concern is that the plan looks more like Putin's plan and propaganda than a real effort to end the war in Ukraine. Senator Mitch McConnell, the former Republican leader in Senate, says he feels that Trump's team focused more on pleasing Putin than on ensuring a lasting peace.
Putin has spent the entire year trying to play President Trump for a fool. If administration officials are more concerned with appeasing Putin than securing real peace, then the president ought to find new advisors. Rewarding Russian butchery would be disastrous to America's interests, and a capitulation like Biden's abandonment of Afghanistan would be catastrophic to a legacy of peace through strength.
Republican Brian Fitzpatrick also criticized the proposal, calling the points put forward Russian propaganda. It's worth noting that Fitzpatrick had already started collecting signatures to bring a bill to a vote that would strengthen sanctions against Russia.
This Russian-drafted propaganda must be rejected and disregarded for the unserious nonsense that it is. This moment requires peace through strength, not appeasement.
Senator Jen Shaheen, a Democrat and co-chair of Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, said the plan looks more like Putin's plan. She stressed that the need to deliver weapons to Kyiv and to impose even stronger sanctions on Russia.
This is a Putin plan for Ukraine. What we need to do is put pressure on Putin to negotiate, and we need to continue to support the courageous people of Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin said that President Trump's peace plan was discussed in broad terms before the August summit in Alaska and was later modernized. He added that Russia received the plan through existing channels with the US administration, but so far the text has not been discussed in detail. Putin suggested that the peace plan could potentially form a basis for a final peace settlement.
If Kiev does not want to discuss President Trump's proposals and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers must understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably repeat themselves in other key areas of the front. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but it will inevitably happen. And overall, we are fine with that, because it leads to achieving the goals of the special military operation by military means, through armed struggle. But, as I have said many times before, we are also ready for peace talks and for resolving issues through peaceful means. However, this, of course, requires a substantive discussion of all the details of the proposed plan.
It's important to note that Ukraine has not rejected the US peace plan. On November 21st, President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the plan with the US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll. The sides agreed that Ukraine, together with the US and Europe, will work at the advisory level to make the path to peace truly workable. Kyiv stresses one key point: any peace must respect Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. Meanwhile, Russia is in no rush to discuss the plan. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the level of contact between Russia and US or Trump's peace plan for Ukraine still needs to be defined. According to the sources at The Guardian, the US could send generals to Moscow as early as next week to discuss the peace plan for Ukraine. A source close to the Kremlin told the media that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin liked the broad contours of the US plan, but the documents does not meet other demands from Moscow. According to The Guardian, these demands include a legally binding guarantee that NATO will not expand eastward and the enshrinement of a neutral status in the constitution. Regarding potential EU membership, the source said Moscow would consider it only if it excludes a military presence, citing Austria's model of neutrality as an example. Meanwhile, Europe is preparing its response to the US peace plan for Ukraine. Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre told media that European leaders will meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit in South Africa to develop European proposals regarding Trump's plan.
First, for a country to give up territories it controls, practically at the negotiating table, contradicts the Ukrainian constitution. The peace plan could still serve as a starting point for a ceasefire and further negotiations, which Ukraine has previously viewed positively. This opportunity should be used, but for that, Europeans need to unite and create a counterbalance in areas where this proposal is unlikely to be accepted.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen confirmed that the European partners are actively working with Ukraine to achieve a fair and lasting peace. She added that no proposals regarding Ukraine should be discussed without Kyiv's participation. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments below.